Welcome to our discussion. Today we're diving into a really provocative essay that argues 2014 was a hinge year, when DEI suddenly became institutionalized in elite US institutions. The piece, mixing personal narrative with hard stats, claims that white male millennials hit a new ceiling in prestige pathways post-2014.
Yeah, that's a bold claim. It really sets up the idea that the shift in hiring and institutional practices drastically changed the game for that cohort, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It's like, picture this. Earlier, in the early 2000s, pipelines across culture industries were dominated by white males. But then, as pressure for diversity mounted, starting around 2014, these paths were recalibrated. That shift meant opportunities started moving towards race and gender diversity in entry and mid-level hiring.
I get that. And it's interesting how the essay ties in personal narratives with concrete data, like stats showing steep declines in the share of white men in these industries. That visual, those charts, they really drive the point home, right?
Yep, exactly. It's like the numbers underscore this whole transition. 2016 saw those do-better commitments hitting home, especially in writers' rooms. And by 2020, after George Floyd catalyzed a reckoning, the hiring landscape was transformed. And it isn't merely confined to media. It's academia, Hollywood, and even fields like law and tech taking a hit.
Speaking of media, the essay draws attention to how journalism and new media have become highly metric-driven with identity-first hiring. That's a fascinating insight, especially when you think about how newsrooms try to replace departures with a more diverse slate.
Right. The essay shows that in mid-2000s essays, even though new media promised broader voices, the reality was still overwhelmingly white and male. And then, with a shrinking industry, you had a double squeeze. Scarce promotions and the pressure to meet these diversity metrics. It's like an identity litmus test for every role, which changes what stories are even told.
Yeah. It almost seems like too much emphasis on optics can sometimes distort creative judgment. I mean, don't you think there's a risk of sacrificing merit for mere representation?
Well, that's one of the debate prompts, really. Whether these outcomes come from explicit discrimination or if they're a byproduct of changing applicant pools and network effects. And honestly, it's a tough call. On the one hand, diversity is crucial. But on the other, if talented white male millennials find themselves excluded, it begs the question about fairness in selection versus discrimination.
Exactly. And expanding from media to academia, the essay paints a picture of an ivory tower scenario too. Something like, even though the academia sphere still looks dominated by older white men, tenure-track hiring after 2014 changed rapidly.
Right? It's almost like the mechanism shifted. Targeted hiring, cluster hires, and those steep search areas that favor racial and gender diversity. It even notes that foreign nationals, not counted as white in some metrics, create yet another wrinkle. It shows how much nuance exists in these hiring strategies.
And it's so interesting how that plays into personal costs. Those white male millennials seem to hit a wall that delays personal milestones like marriage and stable income, according to the essay. Would you agree that those human stories really add depth to the numbers?
Yes, definitely. The emotional arc, envy, self-blame, the frustration of feeling like you're constantly the token, really humanizes the argument. It's not just raw data, it's lived experiences.
Yep,
It forces us to consider what happens when a decade of trying to be the exception becomes the norm.
And then there's Hollywood, this discussion about #OscarsSoWhite and the rapid reweighting of opportunities, which really intrigues me. The essay points out that while newer opportunities favor women and people of color, older white men still dominate the decision-making.
Exactly. It's like inside those studios, the culture has shifted drastically. Directors under 40 that get nominated nowadays include notably no white men. And it's not just about direct hiring, it's about who gets the breakthrough, which means those early roles, like that 2014 Writers' Room experience mentioned. It shines a spotlight on long-standing gatekeeping in Hollywood.
I wonder, though, if the argument might oversimplify by lumping all white male millennials together. Surely talent and experience still play a role, right?
That's a fair critique. The essay does concede that ordinary talent might still fall short under these raised benchmarks. But it also argues that while older, established figures might remain unchallenged due to grandfathering, the newer, less established white males face these steep hurdles. It's a nuanced balancing act between legacy and the desire to diversify.
Moving to other fields, the essay doesn't stop at media or academia. Law, medicine, tech, and even big tech companies have seen a similar trend. It claims that white men are facing shrinking representation, even in these high-status fields.
Yes, and that's quite telling. From law school to residency, and even tech management, as illustrated by the Amazon example, where entry-level demographics from 2014 don't match up in 2024 management. It really paints a picture that these shifts are systemic. And it underscores the idea that if you're a white male, you might suddenly become the token candidate in many sectors.
It almost sounds like a zero-sum game, doesn't it? One group's gain perceived as another's loss. But then, isn't there a counter-argument that greater diversity simply redefines what excellence looks like?
Right. That's one of the strongest counter-arguments. If institutions really recalibrate and broaden their definitions of merit, it could help redefine excellence beyond old metrics.
That's a solid point.
But, as the essay suggests, it depends on whether these adjustments are seen as a deliberate narrowing of pathways for some rather than expanding opportunities for all.
And that brings us back to the debate prompts. Are these changes a result of explicit preferences, or do they also reflect shifts in the applicant pool? In other words, are institutions just responding to what the population looks like now?
Precisely. The essay asks whether the demographic changes track policy preferences, applicant pools, or a blend of both. It's like, do we see the same patterns across every field because there's a change in how people apply, or is it that institutions are filtering differently? It invites a wealth of research, like transparent hiring data and audit studies, to provide answers.
Yeah, and this discussion is not just academic. It has real human consequences. The essay talks about how a decade of struggling to be the exception sends ripples into personal lives. You know, delaying family formation or becoming stuck in a career plateau.
Absolutely. It's not just numbers. It's about how these career shifts affect life milestones, the struggle, the self-censorship, even the bitterness that can arise from repeatedly hitting that invisible ceiling. And
exactly, it really puts a human face on the data.
It makes us ask what the right balance is between institutional goals and individual opportunities.
And here's another angle, the idea of selection versus discrimination. This is where the debate becomes really rich. If institutions are prioritizing performance and potential, regardless of background, then maybe these trends are just a side effect of evolving standards. But if it's a zero-sum game, where one group's gain is the other's loss, then that's a slippery slope.
Right. It's like sometimes the argument goes, look, there's trade-offs in any system. But then you have to ask, at what point do these trade-offs undermine fairness?
Fair challenge there indeed.
It really depends on whether the new measures are increasing overall merit or simply recalibrating who gets counted as qualified.
And let's not forget the cohort effect the essay stresses. For someone who was 30 in 2014, those hiring inequities can be a dramatic personal wall. But if you were from an older cohort, you might perceive the same institutional shifts entirely differently.
Yes, that's a key insight. The same identity can have a very different meaning depending on which generation or cohort you belong to. The narrative isn't monolithic. It's layered with the complexities of timing, opportunity, and even lingering effects of previous hiring practices. It highlights the multifaceted impact of policy changes across different age groups.
So, wrapping up our talk on this, it really seems that while the essay provides robust data and personal stories to support its thesis, there are plenty of counterpoints worth debating. Issues like whether it's discrimination or simply a shift in applicant pools, or how to reconcile merit with mandated diversity measures.
Right. And the essay challenges us to consider not just where things have gone wrong for white male millennials, but more broadly, how institutions can pursue representation without inadvertently setting up competition that feels zero-sum.
Very true.
It's an ongoing debate about gatekeeping and incentives and the nature of excellence in rapidly transforming fields.
And that touches on a lot of sensitive yet necessary discussions about the future of hiring practices across media, academia, Hollywood, law, and tech.
Exactly. It's a call to re-examine our benchmarks and perhaps even our definitions of talent and success. It forces us to ask, what data would truly shift our perspective? Would it be more transparent hiring data, longitudinal studies, or deeper qualitative insights into how these shifts affect individual lives?
Right, that's something I'd love to see more of. And it makes me wonder if these discussions might eventually lead us to alternative models, ones that expand opportunity without fostering resentment or unintended exclusion. Do you think institutions could design systems that don't force a zero-sum choice?
That would be ideal, wouldn't it? It's like reimagining the gatekeeping processes entirely so that excellence is defined in a multidimensional way. With the right data and candid debates, maybe we can look at a system where diverse voices enrich rather than displace one another.
Yeah, indeed. And it will be interesting to see if future studies and audits can validate or challenge these claims. More transparent, real-time hiring data could really lead the conversation into new territory.
Exactly. As we move forward, the conversation must remain balanced. The essay sets a provocative stage, but there's room for multiple narratives. It's about incentives. It's about the human story behind these policy shifts, and about redefining what opportunity looks like for everyone.
Absolutely. Well, this has been a vibrant conversation. It's amazing how one essay can spark so much debate across industries and generations.
Totally. It reminds us that, in the end, the discussion isn't solely about numbers or policies. It's about real people's lives and futures. And getting that balance right is what will drive genuine progress.
Yep, exactly. Here's to hoping that these debates encourage more nuanced approaches and ultimately more inclusive and fair systems across all sectors. Thanks for this deep dive. It's truly been eye-opening.